left, and the Saints picked at 28 overall. And I don't know if you guys watched our live stream. This was one of the more questionable moments of the night when they drafted Peyton Turner, the edge rusher out of Houston.
Yep.
So,
I remember when that happened. We both just kind of looked at each other and never really heard of him. Seemed like he had a good career at Houston. Potentially a little high. They potentially could have gotten him in the second round as well. Position wise, I like it just because in this division you're going to want to get after the quarterback, and especially get to Tom Brady, Matt Ryan, Sam Darnold, all these guys, because none of those guys are really speedsters, as we're seeing in some of the other divisions where teams are starting to get the dual threat quarterback. It's ironic the NFC South might have some of the best offenses, but some of the slowest quarterbacks. But to still just add defensive pass rushing depth is huge. My one thing with this pick, I feel like there's some other guys that could have potentially, I think might have a higher ceiling. I think Gregory Rousseau was still available and was taken a little bit later. I thought this would have been a good spot for him to maybe be a flyer because physically he's just an absolute freak. And so, but time will tell. The pick I really don't like with them is the Ian Bach pick. I don't like that pick at all because you're already having a QB competition with Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston, and now I felt like you wasted a pick on a quarterback that was fine, but some significant ceiling concerns because some of the physical tools aren't really there. Like Mac Jones was more physically gifted than Ian Bach, and he was a fit or book, and was fit overall. You know what I mean? And was passed by all these teams that needed quarterbacks. So,
and that
but also
is like. He wasn't even that great of a college quarterback.
Yeah.
I guess he was in the Heisman running for like the first 6 games. But I mean, as soon as he played against Clemson in their defense, I mean, he looked not good at all. And so for me, the Saints had the worst draft of every team in this division.
I think so as well. It definitely seems It just seemed kind of confusing. Like they didn't have that many picks to begin with, and it felt like they wasted several of them. I felt like they could have gotten better talent.
Well, I also don't even really like the Pete Warner pick, the linebacker out of Ohio State. I think that was a reach for a guy like Pete Warner. He's a good downhill guy. Like if you want to play him inside on like maybe some bigger packages, I could understand why. But for a second-round pick, you get a slow linebacker that is almost 250 pounds that really struggles to guard elite speed, elite athleticism in a division now that, I mean, you have Terrace Marshall Jr., DJ Moore, and Robbie Anderson on the Panthers. You have the plethora of weapons that we talked about earlier in the episode on the Falcons. And then we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who's we're about to talk about, who have weapons galore, and they're all speed. That's for me, I don't understand the pick. The first 2, I don't understand the first 3 out of the 4, really.
Yeah.
The Paulson Adebo pick is the best pick, in my opinion, the best player, and they took him at 76. And so they could have addressed their receiver need at 28 by drafting Elijah Moore, Terrace Marshall Jr.
They could have gotten a better cornerback with Eric Stokes or Tyson Campbell at 28. And to go across Malcolm Butler, because that's the need for them as well. Yeah, it just feels like some of the picks. Yeah, and not really addressing the receiver position until Quan Baker from South Alabama until I think is that Mr. Irrelevant? Is that one of the last picks?
It's pretty close. I think it is.
Okay. Yeah. So not addressing him until the the receiver position until the very end. And actually,
it was Grant Stewart.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But not really addressing too many offensive needs because that was actually some of the bigger issues I felt like for the Saints. I thought their defense was actually pretty solid throughout last year, but Drew Brees did have some arm strength issues. But also, he didn't. Their weapons started to are starting to go away a little bit. Michael Thomas is getting a little bit older, so it was just an interesting draft with the only picks that they did have. So, for me, I don't know about you, but I'm giving them a C personally, and so time will tell, but it just felt like they didn't provide as much value as they could have.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm going to be a little rougher on them because I think they needed to have a good draft, and I also think that they lost really bad in free agency. And so for me, I'm going to go with a D+. Okay. D means done in this book, and I think the Saints have done themselves in. I just look at their picks and I look at everybody else in this division and like even Carolina, and I was pretty critical of Carolina's draft. Even Carolina to me has players that I think will make an immediate impact. And I don't think Peyton Turner is going to make an immediate impact. I don't know if Pete Warner will either. Paulson Adebo I think is the only guy that can come in and start, and that's just because they have no other corners.
Yeah. Well, I will say in Peyton Turner's defense, at this point in the draft, there's a lot of like talent that they could have picked from, and especially I think we see Eric Stokes was 29th, but from this point it was 4 or 5 defensive ends were taken or pass rushers were taken. So at this point, it is going to be all personal preference. It's not like they missed out on a gem, or like a sure thing, in like Chase Young or something like that in the 28th pick, so to say. So only time will tell if Peyton Turner was the right pick. My issue with it is I did feel like there was better talent to take a chance on than Peyton Turner, and potentially Peyton Turner could have even fallen down to their second pick, so to say. Same with Pete Warner, as you said. He's a linebacker, but he's a little bit slower, especially in that division. So, and the one that really just I feel like it's just a waste of a pick because you already have a QB competition, and isn't Taysom Hill signed for 4 years now? He's got a 4-year contract. So then drafting Ian Book just doesn't make. I feel like that's a waste of a pick when you could have gotten good receiver talent there or like running back depth behind Alvin Kamara. If you're trying to look offensively, there's still some good offensive linemen that were there. So that's where it drops for me because I feel like some of the picks don't make sense.
Well, I agree with that. And so I'm going to read off some of the picks that I think would have been better in that spot than what they drafted. Granted, I think a lot of them would be, but I think Elijah Moore would have been a great pick for them. Christian Barmore, the defensive tackle out of Alabama, although I'm glad that they let him drop. And then Levi Onwuzurike, the defensive tackle out of Washington. Asante Samuel Jr. Azeez Ojulari went much later.
Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
Yeah, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah went shortly after that. To me, I think the Saints botched it, but maybe that's why they get paid to do it and we don't, and we're wrong.
Yeah.
But even I think a lot of the experts are kind of saying, like, what did they do?
Yeah. It just seems, well, there's definitely a different kind of philosophy on like take best player available or fill a position in need, and that's where it's like even with this Peyton Turner pick, if this was a need, I feel like there was better talent, but I also feel like he wasn't the best player available at that time either. So, like I agree, I think Elijah Moore with that offense, then Michael Thomas on the other side if he can stay healthy, then Alvin Kamara in the backfield. You got Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston, both dual threat quarterbacks. I think that could become a really deadly offense, especially in a division where you're going to need to put up points. So,
yeah, you have to put up points. And I think a security blanket like Elijah Moore would be great for a quarterback that was going to need some help. And so, I don't know. For me, I question the Saints draft very highly.
Yeah.
So
I agree. So